Hi, this is Sarah Reddy, and I'm going to be talking about communication, the gentle way, the Kural way. And I'm doing this in the context of working with the elderly. How do you communicate with elderly people? How do you communicate, especially with people who are dealing with severe cognitive disabilities or like dementia or Alzheimer's, or people who are not in a very good mental health space. So communication is the key, whether they are dealing with chronic diseases or palliative care, or any other form of ailments, um, or even leading a fairly normal life and going through the aging process. Communication is the key to ensure healthy lifestyles. So I'm basically looking at a couple of people who have influenced our lives, um, in ensuring that we learn to communicate gently and appropriately and in a very tactical manner. Verbal judo is a technique that was developed by a person by the name George Thompson. He was a cop originally, and he um, basically came up with this technique where he said the gentle art of persuasion is about redirecting others' behaviors with words, and it also will generate what he referred to as voluntary compliance. In other words, they will listen to what we're trying to tell them rather than hanging on to what they are um, thinking. So it is using tactical language as opposed to natural language. Natural language tends to be rather counterproductive. I'm also looking at comparing what he is talking about, it's George Thompson is talking about, and what our philosophers and what our ancient wisdom here tells us. This is written by Thiruvalluvar, who was a great poet, and he has written, thousands of couplets, and each one is a gem in itself. Um, it is considered to be a book of universal application on practical spirituality. In fact, another poet is Avayar, compares each couplet to a tiny mustard seed. If you can think of a tiny mustard seed that's filled with all the waters from the seven seas, that much of knowledge and understanding and skill that is embedded into one tiny couplet is how she used the analogy of the seven seas and the mustard seed to a couplet, and the knowledge that it contains. So the third person I'm actually going to refer to here is Kanu Jigoro. He is basically an educator. He was the founder of judo. Judo essentially means the gentle way. And his motto was about maximum efficiency with minimum effort. And you want to do something which will result in the benefit of everyone that is involved. Okay, it's looking at mutual welfare and benefit for all those involved. So, and you do it in a way that it is efficient and with very little effort. So, George Thompson was obviously pretty enamored by this philosophy, and he took it one step further. He took it from the martial arts, took it basically from martial arts, and he used it to work with difficult or challenging people, and used it in circumstances where he needed the other person to comply with what he wanted to say. Being a policeman, I'm sure he has encountered such situations more than you would want to, and he used this technique to help him overcome those challenges effectively. Okay, so in his case, he took it one step further and he called it the three me's. And he said, you have to use a technique or a language that is efficient with minimum effort and you're going to achieve the maximum effectiveness. So he is looking at maximum efficiency, minimum effort, and maximum effectiveness. So one step further from what the original founder of judo did. So George Thompson is also referred to as a rhino in his heyday. It is he understood that people need to be heard. He understood that people need to be validated. He understood that people won't just listen if you force things upon them. So he came up with this technique that would help him handle difficult people and difficult circumstances. So he said there are 5 universal truths about verbal judo. So that's saying all cultures want to be treated with dignity and respect. I mean, every single one of us want that. All people would rather be asked than told what to do. All people want to know why they are asked or told to do something. We need to give an explanation for what we're asking people to do. I mean, they need to know why, and it's basic requirement. All people would rather have options than threats. So when you ask them for something, you need to give them an option or ask them not to do something. You got to show them what they can do. All people want a second chance to make matters right. Okay, so this is something we need to understand and keep that in mind when we are communicating with people. And really, it doesn't matter whether it's elderly or young or old or whoever you're communicating with, these things apply. So in verbal judo, the idea is that the less ego you show, the more power you're going to have. So essentially, you deal with the problem and the situation and you take yourself out of that situation. You as an individual do not exist in that situation. So your ego cannot come into play. Otherwise, it just makes things worse, or it will complicate the situation further. So it's very important that we take our ego out of the situation or the equation, and then try and find solutions for the problem. So natural language, as he says, is disastrous. Okay, whereas tactical language is performing language. It's professional. You use words that will help you achieve your goals. You have that connect with your audience. It's a way to skillfully communicate. In essence, you have to speak a language that is respectful, that is honest, and use it in a way that will make that other person realize that these are the options he has, and they can choose the better of the two, right? I'm also giving you some examples here where in the Kural, or where Tiruvalluvar had mentioned, you need to learn to speak eloquently. Softness of the tongue gains fame and wealth. A foul mouth leads to disaster. A foul mouth is referring to natural language as opposed to tactical language, which would be more soft and purposeful and so on. Weigh and employ words that can perform. There is no stronger tool to achieve virtue and wealth. So you need to think before you speak. You need to carefully assess and use appropriate words, and not just react to a situation. So think before you actually say something. So essentially, we need to be present, we need to be focused, we need to be centered or grounded at all times in order to handle a situation effectively and efficiently. So the kinds of language you're going to use, of course, you're going to avoid natural language, which will cause a lot of challenges for you. What you want to use is tactical language. Use that shape the goals. Never express your feelings unless it's positive. Express them if it's positive. If not, do not express them. Say what you have to say to get the job done. Okay. So you have to basically adapt to that particular situation and see what works. So you got to think quickly, and you have to be on your feet, which means you need to be there, be as in like be present at that moment. And of course, this doesn't come overnight. This is requires a lot of practice, and constant repeated practice is what will help you become more skillful in terms of communication with anyone for that matter. And constant awareness, constant reflection of what you did and how you can improve on yourself is also needed. So technique is everything, okay? And when you are going to get upset over things, you are going to lose the um, battle essentially. So it is important that you tactfully handle these situations and select and employ words that can win over, and no other words can refute their strength. So maximum effectiveness can only be achieved if you are efficient and use minimum effort as much as possible. When you are dealing with verbal abuse, which when you're working with elderly people, that's quite possible. Many times you will be dealing with people that are quite aggressive or verbally abusive in many ways. So best way to handle it would be through by deflecting it or redirecting it, take them away from that situation, or take the conversation in a different direction, so that they don't, instead of saying don't shout or don't scream or don't do that, using those kinds of negative language is only going to aggravate the situation rather than de-escalate the situation. So in order to de-escalate a situation like that, we need to learn to redirect or deflect. In other words, you can say, hey, I'm trying to do this, why don't you try and help me out? Or, I understand how you feel, but maybe you can, but we can try and do something else. You can help me with something else, that kind of stuff. So you need to be able to get their focus on to something else rather than hanging on to what they are thinking. So a natural language will get you to pull into their dynamics, and you get sucked into that situation. Whereas tactical language will help you to deflect. So in statements that start with "I understand that, but," or "I appreciate what you're saying, but then I hear what you're telling me, but this and this needs to happen. I'm sorry you feel that way. Yes, you want to go out, but then can we finish what we're trying to do right now, and then we can think about it, that kind of stuff. I see what you're saying. I understand what you're saying. I got what you're trying to explain, and things like that will validate what they are doing essentially, or saying, or trying to express, and then we go into what we want them to do. Rather, sort of go in their direction and then get them back into our direction. It's basically what we are trying to do. And you may have to use more than one or two of these methods to get them to come to us, because otherwise it will seem too abrupt. So try and use these techniques to steer them away from the path that they are taking, which may not be necessarily appropriate for them. Why do we get drawn in? People only insult when they know it works on us. Okay. Or when elderly case, they don't even know what they're doing most of the time. Condescending is in the delivery, not in the words itself. So we should not get affected by those words or actions that they're doing, because most of the time when we're dealing with elderly, they really honestly don't know, or they may not even remember what they're doing. So it is better to find a way to de-escalate. And again, remember, we are not the target here. You as an individual are not the target, and you need to be removing yourself from that situation. When I say removing, not physically, but I'm talking about your ego. The way you deliver, that is the 93% of the effectiveness is in delivery. Okay. So it is your tone, your pitch, your verbal, your body language, all that plays a huge role. compared to just the words. Words are important, yes, but if you deliver it in a way that it is not appropriate, it's not going to do the job for you. So be kind, be empathetic, and be as understanding as possible. So deflection makes it quick and easy. It's like a verbal armor for us, so often involves techniques such as taking a time out, maybe taking the conversation to something that is less argumentative. You kind of change the topic and do things that is less aggressive or less triggering for them. That's essentially what we are trying to do when we are deflecting. So the whole point of this verbal judo thing is to initiate, is to generate what we refer to as voluntary compliance. They turn around and come towards you. They end up cooperating and collaborating with us. So we need them to comply, collaborate, and cooperate with us to be able to get the situation under control. So when you're doing that, essentially, we want them to perform a certain behavior. And for the elderly person to perform that behavior, you be the instrument. But while you're doing it, as you continue to get that to happen, you are not there anymore. You disappear. You must disappear in order to have power over the other person. Okay, so that's where again comes the ego. It's not about you, but you're looking at the behavior, the problem, and the person who is performing. So as you go from left to right, you basically will disappear and you will generate what we call as voluntary compliance. So it's all about creating and using terms and words or phrases that will help them to come towards us. Okay, that is what is essential, or to come towards complying to what we want them to comply with, or cooperating with us and working with us. So content really is very minimal, 7 to 10%. Tone is about 30 to 40%. The majority is nonverbal. It's how you see them, how you touch them, how far you are, what kind of body language you're using, all that, your face, the way you approach them, all those things really play a huge role as opposed to what you actually say, or the tone also. The tone also has a very big role, but your nonverbal or your body language plays a huge role in communicating. So when you're doing, these de-escalation techniques you're using, or verbal judo, make sure you are at their eye level. Make sure you're, speak slowly, clearly. Again, to do all that, you need to be calm, you need to be centered. Avoid using any slangs, just be clear, crisp, and short and simple words. Give them enough time to respond, which can be quite tricky at times, because you want to say something and you're expecting an immediate response that may or may not happen. So give them that time. Learn to be a bit patient. If you need to, you may want to repeat yourself. Keep instructions as simple as possible. Maybe one instruction at a time is better than multiple or complicated, instructions. Again, you be supportive and empathetic, so they know that they can count on you. Use hand gestures, that might help when you are working with your elderly people. Body language and facial expression, very important, because that they see that much more than hearing what you're telling them. Most of them may have hearing challenges, so they tend to see what you're telling them. So your facial expression and your body language is very, very important. Avoid any negative statements. Don't do that. Don't go there. Don't be silly. The kind of stuff is actually quite irritating and quite demeaning and quite disrespectful for people. So they don't really appreciate such statements. It's rather try and work around it by giving, there's an example that's here. A positive response to a person who wants to get out at an early hour would be, Mom, it's a bit early. Will you help me finish this? We can go a little later. They would work, you can work with that better, and the person would learn to comply with it better. Um, Chances are they may even forget that they even asked or wanted to go out a little later on. So essentially, you have addressed the problem in a much more positive, in a much more calmer, in a much more tactical manner. So, and avoid the desire to correct them. And they may say things, or they may not remember your name. They may not remember a sequence of events and things like that. Don't keep correcting them. Let it go. It really doesn't matter. Actually, end of the day, none of this matters in the sense whether they say the right thing or don't say the right thing, whether they do the right thing or not. What matters is how we respond to them. Okay, and so that we can stay calm and we can keep them calm. So communication here is not just for them, it's also for you. So both have to be at a stage where you can keep your stress levels low. Okay, when you're dealing with something that's really not making sense, it's all the more reason for you to stay calm and be in control. Okay, and to be in control, you got to get yourself out of that situation. So those are the three main learnings here, where you need to be able to work efficiently or using minimum effort. So when you are communicating, use deflection, reflection, redirection as techniques to, de-escalate difficult situations when you're dealing with elderly people, and make sure you respect them at all times. Give them options to work with, give them a chance to express themselves, and you listen to them empathetically. Okay, so that's pretty much the end of the this session. Thank you for listening.